The insane M1 Ultra Mac Studio is the iMac Pro you were waiting for. But where's my MacBook? Everyone's been sad that the high performance iMac wasn't arriving, but it's here. It just doesn't look like you expected. I've been bombarded with questions asking if the iMac Pro is dead, and yes, it's dead. It's been dead for a year, and it was here probably too long. I think it's important to remember that the iMac Pro was only brought in as a stopgap between the 2013 trash can Mac Pro and the 2019 cheese grater Mac Pro. iMac Pro was never supposed to stay around. iMac is all about consumers, and I think that's where we're going. So, this is a bit like an iMac Pro, but just way better. Oh, but the display, the Apple Studio display, is a really dull product, and I'll explain why later. Remember what used to happen when an iMac got hooked up to a cinema display in the past? The heights didn't match, because you had the chin sitting at the bottom of the iMac, but the cinema display lined up with the bottom of the chin and not with the top where the displays are. It was just a mess. And if you wanted to switch out your computer often enough to stay at the cutting edge, you also probably didn't need to replace the display because they didn't get outdated as quickly. There's nothing wrong with those. And even if you're reselling your system entirely, that little box is a lot easier to ship to the new owner than a huge display panel, which is way more delicate, and you just unplug your old box and plug your new one in. Simples. You haven't got to rebuild your whole desk. But of course, as usual, Apple's names make no sense whatsoever, because you know that Mac Pro thing, the super expensive one that you can spec out to $56,000 with Intel Xeon chips? The Mac Studio is about 21% faster than the fastest one, and it costs $4,000. Sorry, Intel, this is faster than your 28-core Xeon Mac Pro, substantially. And yet they don't call it a Pro? So we have Pro chips and Max chips in the MacBook Pros, which are Pro, but the Studio isn't Pro, so is Studio above Pro, in which case, where's the Mac Pro going to be? Is that going to be less? It's all a mess, isn't it? Do we need a MacBook Studio? I don't know. So, let's get on to why that display sucks so bad, and why they might for a while. So, the display itself is 5K, which is great. It's IPS panel. It's not mini LED, which is fine, but, you know, it's nothing exciting. It's got True Tone, it's got the center stage camera in there, and it's got the nice speakers from the 24-inch iMac. The reason that it sucks is because it's basically a 2013-2014 display panel that's been taken out of the previous 5K iMacs, the 27-inch one. That's the reason that we've got this size. It's not because they've made a cool new display, it's because they put it in a different box that's got slightly thinner bezels. Those bezels, I'll be honest, they don't look that thin to me, but they are black, so everyone will know that it's Pro or Studio. Because Pro doesn't mean anything anymore, remember? But here's my take on why this exists and why it's taken a little bit longer for this Mac Studio to come out. I think they were trying to get the mini LED panels ready, which is what we were all expecting, and they can't. So they've taken the 5K panels from the iMac and from the 5K LG Ultra Sharp or whatever they call it display, and they've put it in a new box, and they've gone, that'll do. And I think it's too expensive, because I think $15.99 for a 27-inch version of the basically the display that we have in the 24-inch iMac that's 4.5K, which you can buy for $12.99 with an M1 inside. That seems like a better deal to me. They just need to give you a way of powering it from an external box. So if we find out that you can get a Thunderbolt cable, plug it into the back of your Mac Studio, plug it into your iMac, and all of a sudden it's a display for your Mac Studio, I will be very happy about that. That makes a lot more sense to me. And also it's a cheaper display than the 27-inch one that you get an extra half a K on. But yes, this display does have an A13 inside. What is the A13 for? It's kind of what we expected it would be for. So it's to run the camera that's got center stage on it. By the way, this is the same camera that's on the cheapest iPad you can buy, and also the same chip that's in the cheapest iPad you can buy. It's that base model iPad with the A13, and it's the same camera from that too. What we have got extra in this display, which you don't get in a Pro Display XDR, is speakers, and you get 6 of them, so you've actually got a really good setup for doing some spatial audio around you. I don't know how good that sounds from static speakers that aren't in your ears, but that's something we'll find out in the future. But yes, I think we are going to see mini LED displays coming down the line, which you'll be able to just swap out for your current studio display. Maybe the mini LED ones will be cinema displays, maybe this will be our studio display going forward, and maybe that's how things work. So that's my thoughts on the Studio. I think it's pretty awesome. It's absolutely bonkers fast. 24,000 on Geekbench, which The fastest Mac Pro gets up to about 19,000, and that's a 28-core Xeon. I mean, this thing is absolutely bonkers, which is great. You do need to actually pay, I think, $5,000 if you want to have all of the GPU cores, because there is a binned version at $39.99, which is what we were seeing for the Ultra as kind of the baseline. So if you want the 64 GPU cores, it is going to be $5,000, but I'm going to say that's pretty good. But you also start with a terabyte of SSD inside it instead of the 256s that I think you got in the 2019 Mac Pro, which was just embarrassing. So let me know your thoughts on it down in the comments. I think it's pretty exciting, but we're going to answer some of your questions about the event and the stuff that came out from the event right now. First of all, Dante Burita asks, I gave answers, so why do performance improvement suggestions on Apple's site look so poor? For example, Photoshop is 2.2 times faster with an M1 Max and 2.5 times faster with M1 Ultra. Poor software engineering? So there is an element of that, but this is probably more along the lines of the fact that these processors just don't need that many cores, and you can't spread out all of the processing across 20 cores when you don't need 20 cores. Now, if you're doing batches of files that you're transcoding, stuff like that, that is going to be way quicker, and you're going to start to use more of those cores. It's going to make a lot more sense. But there's certain stuff that will only scale so far in terms of multiple cores, and remember that the actual cores inside them are the same speed as an M1. So about a score of 1700, 1750 maybe on Geekbench, whereas when you get the total of your kind of 20 cores, that's when you're up into 24,000 mark. The Duke of Kidderminster asks, I wonder if they'll release a Mini with an M1 Pro chip later on in the year. I think that's a very good possibility. I think we will probably not see the Max go into the Mini, but I think we might see an M1 Pro and the M2 going into that redesigned Mini. There might be space to get a Max in there. I think they could call that within it. Then the step up to the studio would actually be more about getting the extra I/O and the extra cooling so that you can kind of keep it running as fast as possible for longer. That makes more sense to me, but we will see. That remains to be seen as we go through. Evan Rogers asks, I gave answers, do you think the studio display will work with Windows laptops via Thunderbolt? Particularly, will the camera and speakers still function? I'm okay with software audio controls. I believe it will. But that remains to be seen. I did do a lot of digging online, can't find any solid information about that. Apple didn't specify that it's for Macs only. I think there's definitely some stuff with the Pro Display XDR that doesn't work particularly well on Windows, but also it's like 6K, and most Windows installations don't kind of recognize it as the amount of resolution that it actually has. So there's always going to be some stuff like that, but we'll probably find out as soon as those test units go out at the end of this week, because I assume that we'll be seeing some reviews as of Tuesday next week. Randomness asks, I gave answers, do you think that Apple will add M1 Ultra to the 16.2-inch MacBook Pro? Also, any release for the M2 Max MacBook Pros? So, I don't see that we're going to get the Ultra in there. The M1 Max already draws about 96 watts of power, so that's basically as much as you can get out of the wall through the power connection. So when you're driving it really hard, you're basically not going to be charging that laptop. If you put two of those in there, plus all the other bits and bobs that draw a little bit of extra power, you're going to be into sort of 300 odd watts. So that's just going to collapse when it's even plugged in. So I don't see that happening. But, you know, maybe in the future, but I doubt it. I doubt it very much. Hey, this is Dave here at the gym. So I forgot to answer you a bit about the M2 Max. I don't think it's coming to at least the end of the year, maybe later. Back to editing. Lars Anderson asks, I gave answers, so we got the cool new Mac Mini Pro, the Mac Studio, and the uber cool new monitor. Apple has informed us that there's only one computer left in the Apple Silicon transition. As far as I understand it, it's the next gen Mac Pro. How's that going to work out with the modular design, you think? Where is the 27-inch to 32-inch iMac? Has it been cannibalized by the Studio lineup, do you think? So here's my thoughts on it. We've heard from Guoming Chi that Apple isn't looking to bring any new mini LED display products this year, and I think the reason for that is not necessarily a hardware issue, but in terms of getting the costs down on making them usable. I think that's what they wanted to do with the 27-inch Studio display. I think it wanted to have mini LEDs in it. I don't think they could get the costs to work for that. So I think what we're going to see is probably a wait for the larger iMacs. I don't even know if they're going to do larger iMacs. I think Studio might be what replaces it, and you go with a standalone monitor, and that iMac was always designed to be a consumer product. It was designed to be a home appliance, so it might be that we just get like an M1 Pro, M1 Max version later in the year, or when we get to M2. But I have a feeling that M1 and the M series is what we will see in the iMacs, and then bigger iMacs don't necessarily need to be a thing. The people that are buying the largest ones probably want to have that bit of extra flexibility. This was always the problem with iMacs. People wanted to have customizability because they didn't want to throw out that great display. And that's what Apple's giving people. They're letting people use their displays as long as they want and just change out the computer bit. And it's still elegant. It's still a nice solution to it. I think Apple is onto a winner here. Duke of Kidderminster asks, iCave Answers, will you be upgrading to a Mac Studio or sticking with the Mini? Also, what do you think are the chances of Apple releasing an M1 Pro version of the Mac Mini to replace the Intel models? I'm not planning to upgrade. I think a laptop is the thing that I need next, which will probably be once M2 arrives. That makes most sense to me. Hopefully there'll be a reasonably priced model with those. Fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. But I'd also, to be honest, if they did a price drop on the M1 models, I might even go for that because it's all I need in a laptop. My desktop is absolutely everything that I need right now, so probably won't be going up to the studio. Budget doesn't really allow it right now either. But hopefully going forward, we have had a few interests in sponsorship this week, so watch this space. M1 Pro in the Mac Mini, though, I do think that that's probably going to happen. I think they might even squeeze a Max in, and it will be a case of you get less connectivity on that, so you might not get the SD card slots, you might not get the front connectivity, but we'll see what happens with that, because I think they could probably put that out around about $1,600 for the Max, a little bit of a gap between that and the Studio, and still be a feasible system. So that's it for this show, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to be editing this on the go, so probably won't have all of the Patreons' names up here, but I appreciate you nonetheless. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.